Okay, guys, I'm going to get started now. Feel free just to sort of give you an intro to who I am. My name is Ben Winter. I work in growth at AppQs. So I am actually the AppQs user at AppQs. So I sit in the same sort of seat that you all sit in and work on the same problems in terms of how we think about onboarding, how we think about feature adoption and feedback. And so I end up sitting in the same seat and knowing exactly the experiences you guys go through. And I wanted to sort of share how I think about user journey mapping. It's one of the first exercises I did when joining the company in terms of thinking through how we get someone. I thought my journey map was from trial sign up to the end of their trial, and sort of how I went about that. And sort of some lessons learned that I have, and sort of hopefully that will help you guys as you guys start that journey. So I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. And feel free, if you guys have questions you want to ask, feel free to throw them up. If it sort of fits in with the flow of what I'm talking about, I'll address it then. If not, I'll answer the rest of the questions at the end of the sort of, at the end of the presentation. So getting started. Where it is, present mode. There we go. So this is the user journey mapping webinar. As I said, my name is Ben Winter. I focus on growth. Just a little bit about me. I love skiing, Boston sports, born and raised here, which is where our headquarters are, and I love dogs. So if anyone has any great dog pictures to send later, please send them my way. So just starting with sort of what I like is a great definition of what a user journey is from Gordy Cates. Is a user journey is a timeline of user actions that describe the relationship between your brand and its customers. It's a visualization of all of the users' interactions with your product from their point of view. So I really like this overview as it sort of holistically makes you think about all the things that go into the experience. So and sort of helps take you out of the mindset of I'm using this interface or I just logged into this product and I'm doing this one thing. It's the context around other pieces of brand related materials or other aspects of a customer or user's daily life and how that impacts the experience they're having with the interface that they're working on, that they're in right now. So a user journey map is crucial to understanding. Is crucial to understanding your users and enables you to implement, optimize your onboarding and feature adoption goals. So I think this exercise in terms of before you start building, especially with AppQs, sitting back and taking the theory part of it and sort of thinking through how do I want my user to go through this journey and what does that look like in a perfect world? And I think that sets you up for success with regards to then working through implementing either feature adoption flows or onboarding flows. So the agenda for today, so I'm going to talk you through I'm going to show you quickly our end product and then sort of walk you through the main ways that the main buckets of sort of information that we thought about and how we got to our final product, and then sort of a little bit of implementation and app use. We won't go into too much, but sort of how the user journey map translates into sort of implementation and app use. So this is a very confusing and sort of overwhelming chart in some ways, but I wanted to sort of show you the final product of our user journey map. And this is for our trial experience. So it starts at the top in this discover phase of someone entering their email address and signing up for our free trial, and then through towards them becoming a customer. Today, for the examples that when I allude to part of this exercise, I will be talking about this one small section on the left, which is just sort of the first few flows you see or checklist items you see when you come into AppQs. Now, I wish I could see questions while I'm presenting, which is, I'll just keep on going through that. So important goals to have in mind before you start the experience. The most important thing I can sort of stress is making sure you define your start and endpoints. If you don't have a clear definition of what you're trying to map out, you can cause yourself to go in circles. and sort of also forget about the contained experience. So making sure you have a clear definition of what those start and endpoints are will really set you up for success in terms of how the different ways that a user can get from the starting point to the ending point. User segmentation is also really important. So who does this matter to, right? What properties or events are you going to use to create the experiences that relate? So if they're a new user versus someone who's been in your product for a year, how do you change the experience for those two types of users and make sure that the experience that you're creating keeps that in mind? And then last is measuring success. So how will you measure the success of achieving the goal? And how will you identify areas of improvement? And oftentimes I've seen people don't think about the ways to improve the micro segments of their sort of end goal. So one example being we want to increase the number of users who log back in to our product a second time by 10%. That would sort of be the end goal, but making sure you have both leading indicators in terms of ways to tell if what you're implementing is working. Maybe if that takes 30 days for that event to happen, ways to identify whether that's working leading up to that point, and then also making sure that there's ways to see where drop off is happening. So identifying the areas where you can improve to sort of improve smaller experiences to then work towards that end goal. So starting with defining your start and end points. Important tips I found are, and I have this, and I know everyone sort of like wants to do everything and get as much experience as possible, but bite off a piece to chew. So don't take too large of a task on. Don't try and take your entire funnel and try and get some user from the top of the funnel through towards purchase. Try and take off a smaller consumable bite that you can provide action on. I think identifying the areas of greatest opportunity. So figuring out where there's maybe a large drop-off point in your onboarding or in your feature adoption, and identifying that area and going after it first, and then sort of switching focus to the next area of improvement after that, instead of trying to do all of them at once. And then define how big the journey is. I think knowing how large of a process some can take will help you sort of figure out how long the exercise should take, right? So if you're going from trial sign up to purchase, that's a long, it can be, so for us, for example, it can be 45 days. And that's a long journey. And so thinking through all the little parts that go along that 45-day journey are important, and not just trying to sort of rush through. Understanding the different ways to identify a certain end goal. We're using activation as an example here. So does it start with when someone becomes a blog subscriber? Does it start when someone asks for a demo request? Does it start when someone signs up? Or does it start when someone signs up and does certain actions? So like Twitter's famous for the 10 followers. Facebook's famous for the 10 friends. Twitter's 30 followers. Those are sort of, that was identified as one part of an experience. And then once you did the 10 friends, then that was a second experience. And so they sort of broke up the starting points of those two experiences into smaller pieces. And then for the end, right, it can be, are you trying to get someone just to install? Are you trying to get someone to purchase? Are you trying to get someone to install plus something else? Just having a clear definition of what your start is and what your end is will really help define the actions you want someone to take along the way. So a large journey is comprised of smaller journeys. So breaking up the journey into smaller pieces will improve messaging and identify drop-off points. So by taking that start and end point that are clearly defined and then breaking it up into smaller pieces, you will enable yourself to find areas where maybe they're dropping off in that funnel, and also you'll be able to better message those pieces of information, right? So you'll say, okay, I want this user to do action A, and all of the messaging in your flows and in your modals can be driven around action A, versus trying to have it maybe do A plus another action that you want to happen later on. The breaking it up will really enable you to sort of refine your messaging for that one action. So here's an example from us. So when I started, we took the sort of sign up to purchase, and then we figured out sort of, okay, that's too long of a journey to try and take someone through in one period. So we then threw install into the middle and broke it up into 2 journeys of sign up to installation and then installation to purchase. And then from there, we then broke up, as you can see, sign up comes, and then there's multiple little steps. I don't know if any of you have onboarded in the last 3 weeks. This is what the experience you would have gotten. You have sign up, get flow builder, create first project, invite teammate. Those are all smaller little experiences to get you to installation. I'm just going to close my screen and see if there's any questions, since I can't see any of them. Okay, no questions so far. So then user segmentation. This is another really important part of sort of the journey map of who is getting this experience. And I think that helps sort of frame the mindset around what the messaging should be, but also what actions they need to take, right? So if it's a feature adoption where you're switching over, let's say, to a new dashboard, if the user is brand new, their introduction to that dashboard is obviously different than someone who has familiarity with your product and maybe has spent 6 months in the previous view and then is being moved over, where you're instead highlighting maybe where things have moved and changed and what stayed the same. And so thinking through who your users are and what users are getting what experiences will really help hone messaging and also not ensure your users get the information they need as quickly as possible and not information they don't need. And I think for me personally, thinking about a user's time as being very valuable and only getting them the information that will help them achieve their goals is very important. And I think segmenting users based on what other things, whether actions they've taken or some demographic data, is very important. So there's a lot of ways you can segment users. The two most sort of popular ones are user lifecycle. So are they a lead, an opportunity? Are they in a trial? Are they in onboarding? Are they in steady state or churned, or sort of the more famous or popular sort of life cycles? And then there's user types, right? So are you an admin? What's your role? Are you lead grades? You're going to be talking to sales, or any demographic information in terms of and geographic information in terms of where they live, what they're doing, all of those. And then obviously there's cross-sectional. So do you treat leads who are an admin differently than leads who aren't an admin, or whatever roles they have? So if they're an engineer or not, do you give them different experiences? There's a lot of different ways you can segment users. I would say one of the pitfalls of this, though, is that you can try and get too into the details. And so making sure you sort of pull out and think thoughtfully about why you're making another segment of users and creating a new experience is a really good exercise after you sort of finish. We ended up, I remember when we did this exercise, I wanted to sort of dynamically give content to every different type of role based on whether you were a designer, developer, a product manager, all of those different experiences. And the amount of work that takes and also the benefit you get from that probably didn't match well. And so I got pushed back. And I think pulling yourself back out and sort of evaluating how much segmentation you need is an important exercise as well. So then measuring success. I think this is one of the things that people forget about doing as part of this exercise, and is probably the first thing that you should do, and is very important in terms of making sure that you can iterate on what you've built in your experiences for your users, and then improve it and sort of get it to where it needs to be. So I kind of put metrics. I put metrics of the different sort of overarching. So in the top is a ratio, and then I usually like to have a ratio and then an average. So So for example, for sign up and to purchase, there's obviously the conversion rate of the number of people who purchase based over the number of people who sign up. That's sort of the North Star metric of this exercise is increasing that ratio. But then within that, there are, so if you take our previous sign up to install, there is both the number of installations divided by the number of signups, but then there's also the average time to install, right? So if people are installing faster or slower than before, that can tell you something in terms of maybe your messaging is working well, and if they're installing faster, that means they're understanding what they need to do quicker, and you should look into sort of improving that even further. Or maybe there's just a period of time that it takes for someone to install, and thus making sure that number doesn't drop is what you're measuring instead of trying to move it up faster. Same thing goes with on the other side, sort of number of purchases to number of installs. How long does it take someone to go from installation to purchase is an interesting sort of metric to also watch. And then you can get into the minutia, right? So down to the bottom row, there's like get the flow builder. These are all sort of in the app queues mindset, but there is so the number of flow builder downloads, number of signups, and then for create first project, average number of flows to the average number of installations, but then also how many flows is a user creating is another really important metric. So so for me, in terms of if you download the flow builder and you build an experience, great. But if you download the flow builder and you build out 4 experiences, that's even better. And I think watching those 2 in tandem is important. And the same goes obviously for invite a teammate, right? Are people just going through the motions of inviting a teammate and doing just one? And there's a typo there. I apologize in the bottom right. That should be number of invites, number of people who, number of accounts of the single person. But are they inviting 2 or 3 people? And I think that's an important indicator, actually probably more important than the percentage of people who invite is the number. So knowing which matters more to you, is it the ratio of X to number of people who could have done this, or is it the number of or is it the frequency with which an average user does it, is an important thing to have in mind in terms of which metric you want to watch the most. Then the impact of good measurement. You can iterate faster. You can identify areas of opportunity to improve, right? So let's say there's a huge drop-off point between when someone signs up and they get the flow builder, then I would want to focus my sort of efforts after that on the flow builder part to make sure that that can increase, and then hopefully that's trickle down. And knowing where in the journey there's a big drop-off point is also very important. If it's happening at the end, then maybe you want to look at sort of, maybe you want to reconsider the sort of actions you're asking the user to take along the way. Or if they're dropping off at the beginning, maybe there's something that's happening right up front that's sort of degrading the entire experience that you want to look at instead. And if it's in the middle, maybe it's a combination of both. So I think it's important to know where in that funnel those drop off or there's areas of opportunity are happening. You can simultaneously analyze your end goal, like the North Star metric, and then smaller goals that comprise the end goal. So I think that's really important in terms of having sort of micro initiatives within a larger context of what the sort of the top line goal is. You can communicate with your team. So that's a really, I think that's one that is often forgotten, but super important in terms of, hey, we're working towards increasing activation and we're moving these 3 metrics really well. We're still not getting the activation metric we want, but we are seeing a lot of growth in these 3 areas. So if we're able to add this, if we're able to increase this last sort of action, I think we'll see a huge rise in activation versus everything's not really working. And I think those are important. It's important to celebrate your wins as much as it is to identify your losses. And if you only have one metric that you're sort of chasing after, it can maybe mislead the story and also not enable you to tell a good story to your teammates. A/B testing is another great impact of good measurement, right? It allows you to sort of hone in on, do I want to try and change this flow or modal, and sort of it enables you to isolate areas where you want to do some testing to see if you can improve a metric. Just tools that I use for good measurement are app queues, obviously, Google Analytics, and then some form of analytics tool, right? So Amplitude, Mixpanel, Kissmetrics, I think in tandem, that's what I use to sort of analyze our onboarding flows and our user journey to see if they're working well. So with app queues, you can see specific sort of flow by flow metrics. And then with an analytics tool, you can see sort of the higher level North Star metrics. And using those in tandem is really good. Implementation. Sorry, last. Up we have QA. It won't open. Let's just do, I'll do the last slides and I'll show you. So here's an example of sort of where we built out one experience. So we isolated get the flow builders being one sort of section, and then there's tooltip, page change, modal, and then the action of get the flow builder. And the good thing in that with app queues is that I can see how many people are clicking the tooltip, and then the page change happens, and then there's a modal that comes up. And so, and this is in a checklist, so I can see, are people actually triggering that checklist item themselves? Are they then triggering that checklist item and following through on the flow? Or are they just doing it themselves and not even using the sort of the experience layer that I've built out? And I think that really helps get an understanding of what's intuitive in the product versus what a user could use some help seeing. And it's interesting, you can see sort of, that's where the advantage of having app queues and Mixpanel or some sort of analytics tool helps a lot, in the sense that I can see how many people are doing that action, and then I can see how many people are doing that action with the experience of app queues. And so sometimes it can be disheartening to see, oh, well, this isn't really, the app queues aren't really helping people or finding this out on their own. You don't really need an experience for this thing. It's intuitive in the product. Or, hey, people are using this app queue, but they're still not achieving the goal. So clearly something needs to improve. And I think that is a really good way of sort of using the two tools in tandem to identify ways to get someone through the journey. So how this was built in app queues, I thought it'd be helpful to sort of see just a way to sort of cross-team all hands on deck sort of cross-team use that took to build this. So I worked with people in customer success, sales, marketing, and product to sort of, I created an initial draft myself, and then I sort of talked about what I was going to do with other departments. I think it's always helpful to get everyone's perspective. Everyone's perspective is different. Try to sort of isolate the feedback in a way that's tangible for you, as everyone has different opinions on based on their end goals. But I think it's helpful to sort of, I picked up on new things each time that I didn't, that I wouldn't have had I not talked to the other departments. And then I think continuing to coordinate communication throughout the process is really important as you do this exercise. Things that change, things that move, especially if it impacts one group or another. An example of that being, so if I go back to our initial, I'll go back at the end to the journey map, but there's emails that go out, and our sales team emails leads as well. And so making sure that like the emails that I was sending to people who signed up coordinated with their communication efforts is an important ongoing conversation to make sure that you're aligned. So then during that process, there's a content design review, you build a draft, and then you test it. And then I would create your segments and then go live. And then we served it to a couple of users. And then once we felt good about it, we incorporated it into our checklist. So it was live for every user who onboarded. And that's sort of the process we went through to sort of get there. And so in concert, a well-defined user journey map with app queues can drastically increase important company-wide metrics, right? Separating the end user journey into micro goals enables you to build shorter flows. It easily defines checklist items, moments that you want a user to get to that aha moment. And then tracking progress is easier. So drop-off points are easy to identify and iterate on. And now questions, which I saw one. So the question from Robin is, how often should you measure? Once a new flow is stabilized, how often should you revisit it? It depends on what your your activation period is. So for us, it's 30 to 45 days. So once it's stabilized, I check it. I check it every 2 weeks. I think that's a fair sort of way to make sure that nothing sort of is decreasing conversion, but also if you're moved on to a new area of focus, doing that sort of daily or weekly checking won't really help. And I also think just in general, it's better to wait a little bit of time to sort of let things run. So people are always quick to be like, A/B test quickly, iterate fast, do something in the first 7 days. If it's not working, change it. I think for us, I waited at least a month to 2 months to see how things go before I start making any sort of testing decisions, because I think it's important to let things sort of go from start to finish, right? So 45-day, 30-day activation. Let that activation period actually come through before you start making decisions on what to change. Gabrielle asks, how do you work with the test before going live? So with AppQues, you can segment, create a user segment. So what we did is we created a user segment that only included @appqs.com usernames, and then we were able to create fake accounts on our sort of on our website, and then go through the experience as a brand new user. So you can do I can do Ben plus like new test at appqs.com, and that will create a brand new account for me on our system. But it will and we were able to filter to say only show to that email address, and that's how we tested. We now have test mode live, which helps a lot. Which you should see in your AppQues dashboard now. That enables you to show a flow and experience. I also think it's important. Test mode is great, and I think it really helps in terms of isolating a single experience. I would recommend creating a dummy account as well to sort of go through the holistic experience as well of okay, I go in, I type in these few things and actually interact and go about setting up your account, because I think it helps with the messaging part of it. There will be a link to this webinar. Someone asked if there's a link to the webinar and slides, and yes, there will be. We have the appqs.com/webinar series, and this will be posted on there. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't want to keep people here if there's no more, but I'll give another minute for questions if anyone has any. Yes, Robin, there I can explain test mode. So test mode, let me see if I can pull it up on my I don't know if I'm logged into an account that's installed, because I have ones that aren't. Yeah, I don't. But test mode, there, when you go to a flow, you go to the individual flow page, there should now be a button that's in orange, I believe, that says test flow, and it creates a URL that you can then share with other people, and it will basically go to the page you have the flow set a trigger on and show the flow. So it's a new feature we just released this week, and people have been really excited about it. It's they've said it sort of helped them with we hear that testing and getting feedback is important, and this sort of help with that. So there should be, yes, if you go to the flow settings, Robin, there is a test button next to the publish button, or if it's published already, there's an unpublished button. And if you click that, it will generate a URL, and you can share that with people or use it yourself. Gabrielle, I have another question regarding testing. Can we carry on both of us? Oh yes, Gabrielle, if you want to reach out to me at Ben at AppQues, I'd be happy to sort of answer your questions. That's definitely, feel free to email me, and we can set up a time to talk. Anyone else before we close down? Sean, test mode is different than permalink. So permalink is used if you want to launch the flow. The test mode allows you to do testing on the actual flow. So they're a little different. They are, one is before you necessarily go live. Permalink means that the flow is live and you're launching it using the URL, versus this is a test of the flow. So that's sort of the difference. Anyone else? Correct, Sean. And I can, I think we have, I believe docs have gone up about that. Sean, if you send me your email address, I can follow up with you and provide you the information on test flow. So I don't tell you anything that's incorrect, but also get you the right grade. Anyone else before I, all right, guys, thank you guys so much for taking the time today. I hope this was a helpful exercise for you, and feel free, my email address is ben@appcues.com. If you have any questions and would like to follow up about anything we talked about today, I'd be happy to help. Looking forward to seeing you all building in AppCues, and hope this user journey mapping exercise helps you guys increase activation and retention. Have a good day.